They said he was weak, a prince who wrote poetry instead of war plans, a son who bowed too easily. To his father, that softness was shame. One night, Frederick tried to escape the palace not for freedom, but for peace. He was caught, dragged before his father, and made to watch his closest friend, the only person who ever understood him, executed before his eyes. Something inside him died that day, not from fear, from clarity. The boy who once begged for love vanished. In his place rose a man who needed nothing from anyone, a man who built an empire not on affection, but on discipline, solitude, and will. They called him cold, they called him cruel, but history called him the Great. Because here's the truth. When a man loses the illusion of wanting to be loved, he becomes a force no one can control, a beast that cannot be conquered. What happens to a man after he stops chasing love? Watch till the end. You'll see. He stood at the edge of the city lights. The noise of everything he used to chase, approval, affection, validation, was finally behind him. His phone buzzed once, twice, then stopped. He didn't pick it up. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like truth. Every man has that night, the one where something inside you snaps not in rage, but in realization. You see it clearly. The people you tried to please never respected you. The love you fought for was conditional, and the world that promised to celebrate your goodness only rewarded your usefulness. That's the breaking point. Not when a man is abandoned, but when he stops abandoning himself. Let's be honest. Most men are trained from birth to believe love is oxygen. That to be good is to be liked, to be kind is to be chosen, and to be strong is to be approved of. We chase affection like soldiers chasing the sound of a drum, believing if we stop, we'll disappear. But here's the thing. Approval is a leash disguised as warmth. The need to be loved quietly bends your spine, changes your tone, edits your truth. It makes lions purr and wolves wear collars. You can see it in everyday life. At work, the man who always agrees with his boss never gets promoted. He becomes predictable, invisible. In relationships, the man who never says no ends up resented. In friendships, the one who gives everything eventually stands alone because no one respects a man who wanted to draw blood for his own boundaries. That's not cruelty, that's nature. Even the kindest hearts have limits, and when you erase yours for the illusion of love, you teach the world to step over you. History keeps proving this. Look at Attila the Hun. The Roman Empire tried to buy his mercy with gold and diplomacy, but Attila couldn't be tamed by gifts or flattery. He didn't crave their friendship, he demanded their surrender. He ruled not because he was loved, but because he didn't need to be. That detachment made him unstoppable. Then look centuries later at Howard Hughes, the genius aviator who built empires out of obsession. He could have been a modern god of innovation, but he wanted the world's approval more than his own peace. He spiraled into isolation, haunted by germs, headlines, and the fear of being forgotten. It wasn't madness that broke him. It was the addiction to validation. Two men, two worlds apart. One untamed by affection, the other destroyed by it. That's the split that defines every man's journey. In the corporate world, it looks quieter, but feels the same. You know that coworker who always volunteers, always smiles, always apologizes for existing? He burns out before the year ends. Meanwhile, the man who knows when to walk away, the one who says, "No, that's not my job," is called arrogant for 6 months, then promoted in the 7th. People might not like a man who stands firm, but they always remember him. And in love, it's no different. How many men stay in relationships long after the respect has died because they fear loneliness more than dishonor? How many shrink, soften, and twist themselves just to keep someone who's already halfway gone? We call it compromise, but deep down it's decay. You lose the edge that made you alive, the fire that once made you magnetic. Every man pays for his need to be loved until he refuses to. The Roman Emperor Hadrian learned that lesson too. Early in his reign, he tried to win senators' favor through mercy and appeasement. They despised him for it. But once he embraced solitude and ruled by discipline, Rome obeyed. He built walls not just around empires, but around his emotions. And from those walls, He watched peace return. It wasn't affection that preserved his legacy. It was distance. Then there's Frederick the Great of Prussia, a man who loved art and philosophy more than war. His father called him weak, humiliated him publicly, even executed his friend to harden him. For years, Frederick sought his father's approval until that day when he realized love from a tyrant is just another prison. He never chased it again. When war came, he commanded armies with ruthless precision, winning respect even from his enemies. He didn't become great because he was loved. He became great because he finally stopped asking to be. So what really happens when a man reaches that point? Something primal awakens. You start seeing through the smiles, through the politics, through the noise of good intentions. You stop performing. You move different, slower, deliberate, untouchable. People notice the shift but can't name it. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. You're no longer acting from hunger, you're acting from clarity. But let's not romanticize it. Detachment isn't coldness. It's not about rejecting love, it's about rejecting illusion. You can still love deeply, but from choice, not dependency. You can still give, but from strength, not fear. Love without illusion is freedom. Love with illusion is slavery. Even Machiavelli saw this in politics. He wrote that it's better for a ruler to be feared than loved because fear you can control. Love you cannot. He wasn't glorifying cruelty, he was exposing the truth of power. The moment your survival depends on affection, you're already someone else's subject. In modern life, it's the same psychology manipulators feed on approval seekers. The boss who exploits loyalty, the partner who uses guilt as a leash, the friend who disappears when you stop serving their comfort. When you stop needing love, you cut off their supply. That's when respect begins. And here's the paradox that breaks most men. The more you try to be loved, the less lovable you become. The more you chase connection, the more people sense your emptiness. But when you stop, when you genuinely don't care whether they stay or go, something strange happens. They start coming closer. Because strength, not softness, draws admiration. Because peace, not pleading, is magnetic. You become like still water, calm on the surface, impossible to drown. They feel your presence even when you say nothing. That's the moment the beast awakens. Not a monster, but the primal man who walks without fear of losing what never truly belonged to him. There's a story of a soldier I once met. He said, "The first time I walked into battle, I was terrified of dying. The second time, I had already accepted it. That's when I stopped flinching. That's the secret. When you stop fearing loss, you stop losing. When you stop begging for love, you start commanding respect. And respect lasts longer than affection ever will. So the breaking point isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's the quiet moment when a man finally sees what was always holding him back. The illusion that being loved is the same as being free. It isn't. Love can heal, yes, but only after you stop needing it to. From the moment a boy opens his eyes, the world begins teaching him that love is a reward. Good grades, good manners, good behavior. Smile, obey, fit in, don't upset anyone. Love is never given freely. It's earned, conditioned, rationed. So he learns to perform, not to live, but to please. Not to speak truth, but to avoid rejection. And little by little, the boy forgets who he is underneath all that approval. That's the seed of illusion. We are trained to believe that love is the highest currency, that if people love you, you've won. But most love in this world isn't love. It's transaction. It's the world saying, "I'll care for you, but only if you stay who I need you to be." Here's the thing. People don't love what they can't control. So when a man begins to think for himself, when he starts saying no, when he stops begging to be understood, they call him cold. They call him distant. But in truth, he's finally sober. He is seeing what most refuse to admit, that so much of what we call love is simply fear dressed as affection. Psychologically, the need to be loved runs deeper than ego. It's survival. In our ancestors' world, rejection from the tribe meant death. Your safety, your food, your identity all tied to belonging. So the brain evolved to crave acceptance as strongly as oxygen. The modern man still carries that wiring, But now the tribe isn't a campfire. It's the workplace, the social circle, the relationship, the internet. And every good job, every I'm proud of you feeds that ancient hunger. But here's the trap. The modern world monetizes that need. From ads that tell you to be loved by wearing this to self-help gurus who whisper, "They'll love you when you become this version of yourself." Everything is built on the same lie that you are not enough until someone says you are. And when a man believes that lie long enough, he becomes easy to control. He'll sacrifice his time, his values, even his self-respect for a taste of approval. The illusion of love becomes the leash that leads him quietly through life. Look around. The artist who stops painting what he loves because the audience prefers something safer, the employee who laughs at jokes that insult him just to stay liked, the husband who hides his opinions to avoid an argument. They call it compromise, but it's not. It's the slow death of authenticity. Real love doesn't require performance, but the system we live in rewards compliance, not authenticity. The schools grade you for obedience. The jobs promote you for likability. The social media algorithms amplify you for conformity. And then we wonder why men feel lost because everything around them trains them to seek love by erasing themselves. That's the quiet tragedy of modern masculinity. Men are starving for connection but terrified of rejection. So they choose the smaller pain, they shrink to fit the mold. But you can be loved and free at the same time if your love depends on your obedience. Let's talk about Frederick the Great again. Before he became the warrior philosopher king, he was a poet's son forced into a soldier's body. He tried everything to earn his father's love, charm, intellect, even submission. It didn't work. His father despised weakness, and Frederick's obedience only fueled that contempt. It wasn't until Frederick stopped chasing his father's approval and embraced the solitude of his own mind that he became powerful. He built an empire of will, not affection. And history remembered him not as the obedient son, but as the unshakable ruler. That's what happens when a man stops chasing love, he stops negotiating his worth. In psychology, they call it attachment conditioning. The child learns that love comes with strings, and he carries that script into adulthood. He dates people who make him prove his value. He works for bosses who dangle validation like bait. He lives in cycles of trying harder and feeling emptier, because deep down, he's still that boy at the dinner table, waiting for a nod of approval that never comes. But here's what they done to teach you in therapy. Love isn't what heals that wound. Awareness does. Because the moment you see the pattern, you stop playing the part. Howard Hughes never learned that lesson. The world praised him as a genius engineer, filmmaker, billionaire. He was surrounded by admiration, yet hollow inside. Every achievement felt temporary because the applause never lasted. He tried to buy love with fame and power, but the more he owned, the less he trusted anyone who gave him affection. He mistook validation for connection, and it destroyed him. The man who could touch the sky with his machines couldn't touch his own peace. His story is extreme, but the psychology is ordinary. Most men don't end up in penthouses. They end up in emotional cages, building their lives around people who only love the mask. They lose themselves trying to be seen. Even in religion and politics, love is used as control. Empires tell you, obey, and God will love you. Movements say, agree, or you're unworthy. It's the same illusion with a different costume. Love as reward, obedience as proof. And men who don't question it become slaves with smiles. But the moment you question it, the moment you say, maybe I don't need to be loved by everyone to be whole, the entire system shakes, because a man who no longer fears rejection becomes uncontrollable. He becomes unpredictable. He becomes real. There's another story. Attila the Hun, feared across continents. He was ruthless, yes, but not because of hatred. He had clarity. The Romans tried to soften him with gifts, wine, women, even titles. They thought love would civilize him. It didn't. He saw through it. He said once, "No nation has the power to bribe me with its daughters." That's the psychology of independence when affection no longer clouds judgment. The empire that couldn't conquer him with war tried to conquer him with warmth. It failed. because warmth built on manipulation is just another weapon. And let's not forget the everyday man, the one clocking into a job he hates to fund a life that no longer feels his. He stays because the people around him say, "You're doing the right thing." He smiles at the family photo but knows the man in it is dying quietly. He's not weak, he's conditioned. Conditioned to believe love means sacrifice. But no one told him sacrifice without purpose is slavery. He thinks love will one day validate his pain. It won't. It will just demand more of it. When you see through this illusion, you begin to understand what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that human affection is fickle and fear of loss is stronger than love of loyalty. He wasn't cynical, he was awake. He understood that love in society is often conditional, fragile, and fleeting. If your power depends on being adored, you're already at their mercy. But if your strength comes from within, love becomes optional, not essential. And that's the shift when you stop chasing love and start choosing respect. When you stop asking to be accepted and start accepting yourself. That's when you begin to walk alone not as an outcast, but as a sovereign. Because love, in its truest form, isn't supposed to complete you. It's supposed to meet you. Two whole people standing side by side, not one begging the other to fill a void. But you can only reach that when you let the illusion die. The illusion that being loved makes you valuable. The illusion that approval means belonging. The illusion that comfort equals connection. Love is not the goal. Clarity is. Once you have that, love finds its rightful place not above you, not beneath you, but beside you. When a man stops chasing love, the world grows quiet. At first, that silence feels unbearable. You've spent your whole life chasing noise, praise, attention, warmth. And now, all at once, it's gone. You wake up one morning and realize no one's clapping anymore. No one's telling you you're doing the right thing. That's the test most men fail. Because that silence, it isn't emptiness. It's the sound of power returning home. The transformation doesn't happen with a bang. It begins in the smallest, most private moments. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying every boundary. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You realize peace is more valuable than being liked. That's when you start to rebuild brick by brick. But this time, the foundation isn't other people's opinions. It's self-respect. And that, right there, changes everything. Let's be honest. For most of your life, your worth was external. Someone else had to stamp it, approve it, validate it. Parents, bosses, lovers, friends, the entire network of your identity built around their feedback. But freedom begins when you cut that power cord, when you no longer outsource your value. The first symptom of transformation? Discomfort. Because the same people who benefited from your compliance will call your confidence arrogance. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right. You have. You've changed from being a mirror of their needs to a reflection of your truth. That shift threatens them because it forces them to confront their own illusions. Think of Emperor Hadrian again. In his early rule, he tried to please everyone. Senators, soldiers, nobles. He wanted harmony. But harmony built on appeasement collapses the moment someone refuses to play along. When he realized that, he transformed. He withdrew from the noise, studied philosophy, built walls not to isolate Rome, but to define it. Boundaries became his form of strength, and from those walls, peace emerged. That's what happens when a man stops apologizing for his edges. Transformation doesn't make you heartless. It makes you precise. You start seeing where your energy leaks. Every yes that came from guilt. Every sorry that came from fear. You plug those holes. You become intentional. And suddenly the same life that once drained you starts feeding you. That's not mysticism. That's psychology. Because when your actions align with your core values, the mind stops fighting itself. You reclaim cognitive energy. That's why men who stop people-pleasing look calmer, stronger, more magnetic. Their nervous system is finally theirs again. But transformation is not only internal. It shows in how you move through the world. At work, you stop being the agreeable employee and become the reliable leader. You say what others are afraid to say. You make decisions without waiting for permission. That's when influence replaces approval. People may resist you at first, but eventually they follow, not because they like you, but because they trust your certainty. In relationships, the change is even more profound. You no longer chase affection through compliance. You communicate with honesty, not performance. You stop trying to be the perfect man and start being the real one. And something powerful happens. People either leave or they rise to meet you. Both outcomes are victory. Because love that only survives when you hide your truth isn't love. It's theater. And you're done acting. Frederick the Great embodied this kind of transformation. After years of humiliation under his father, he ruled not through inherited fear, but through cultivated discipline. He read philosophy before dawn, led soldiers by day, composed music by night. He didn't wait for anyone's applause. He became his own audience. That's self-respect in motion. The king who once sought love became the man who inspired loyalty. There's a lesson there. When you stop chasing approval, you stop being predictable. And unpredictability is power. The modern world doesn't understand that. It rewards predictability. It wants men soft, agreeable, marketable. But the man who rebuilds himself from truth can't be branded. He can't be sold to. He becomes what the system fears most: independent. In the corporate jungle, that independence is your sharpest weapon. When you no longer depend on flattery or fear of firing, you start taking strategic risks. You speak truth to power. You move differently in meetings. You don't play politics, you play purpose. And people notice. Because confidence backed by authenticity is the rarest thing in any room. Transformation also changes how you handle failure. When you were approval-driven, failure felt like death. Now it becomes data, feedback, not identity. You don't crumble, you recalibrate. You stop thinking, "What will they think of me?" and start asking, "What can I learn from this?" That mindset alone separates leaders from followers, creators from imitators, kings from servants. Then comes the most misunderstood stage: solitude. People fear it because they mistake it for loneliness. But solitude is the forge where the new man is built. It's where you learn that peace doesn't require an audience. That success feels different when you no longer need someone to clap for it. That the greatest luxury isn't wealth, it's inner quiet. Even Machiavelli, often misread as a schemer, wrote about solitude as the ruler's greatest tool. He said, "A prince must learn to rely on his own counsel." Translation: a man who can think without echo is immune to manipulation. There's a story I heard from a boxer who trained in absolute silence. He said the hardest part wasn't the punches, it was the loneliness between them. The world used to cheer when he entered the ring, but during training there was nothing. No music, no crowd, just the sound of his own breath. He said that's when he realized if you can love yourself in silence, no crowd can ever own you again. That's the essence of transformation. In love, transformation changes the game entirely. You no longer give affection to prove worth. You give it as an expression of abundance. You no longer chase chemistry. You seek compatibility of values. You no longer fear losing someone. You fear losing yourself. And that flips the dynamic. Because true connection begins only when both people stop performing. There's a quiet, steady strength that comes from that. You can love someone deeply, yet never forget yourself in them. You can walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. That's not detachment, it's maturity. That's not arrogance, it's balance. The more you live this way, the more you notice how few people can. The world is full of men who look strong, but live as slaves to opinion, to validation, to affection. But the man who crosses that line, who no longer needs to be loved to sleep peacefully, that man becomes a paradox. He's feared and respected, misunderstood and admired, alone, but never lonely. He doesn't announce his worth anymore, he embodies it. He doesn't argue about loyalty, his presence demands it. He doesn't chase destiny, he walks toward it. That's the transformation from approval to power, from noise to silence, from dependence to sovereignty. Because power isn't domination. It's ownership of your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions. It's the ability to stand in a storm without bowing to it, and once you taste that, you can't go back. The boy who once begged for love dies quietly, and in his place rises a man who doesn't need to be loved to love himself. That's when the world shifts. Not because it changed, but because you did. The transformation is never about becoming harder. It's about becoming whole. You stop trying to fix yourself through others and start discovering what was never broken. You stop searching for love in eyes that cannot see you and start seeing yourself clearly. That's when your life begins to align, not around comfort, but around conviction. Not around applause, but around purpose. And when you walk with purpose, love is no longer bait. It's a companion that follows, not leads. There comes a point in every man's evolution when the noise fades for good. No more chasing, no more explaining, no more fighting to be seen. You wake up one morning, look in the mirror, and realize you are not waiting for anyone's permission to exist. That is the birth of the unconquerable man. He doesn't rise in defiance, he rises in calm, because the war inside him is finally over. When a man reaches detachment, his presence changes before his words ever do. He walks differently, slower, grounded, deliberate. There's a stillness about him, the kind that makes others pause without knowing why. It's not arrogance, it's equilibrium. The man who once craved to be loved now radiates something far rarer: self-possession. He belongs to himself. And here's the paradox. The world starts giving him everything he once begged for: respect, attention, admiration. But now it doesn't move him, because once you stop needing what they control, you control everything. The unconquerable man doesn't live in rebellion, he lives in mastery. He doesn't need to prove his strength, his restraint is proof enough. He doesn't argue for respect, his boundaries say it louder than words. He doesn't chase purpose, he embodies it. This kind of power is quiet, almost invisible. But people feel it. In meetings, conversations, relationships, there's a gravity around him. He doesn't dominate, he influences. Because he's not fighting to convince you, he's too busy being certain. There's a story about Frederick the Great later in his life. After years of war, when his empire stood strong, he spent mornings walking his gardens alone. No guards, no ministers, just him and the sound of wind. When asked why he refused constant company, he said, "A king who cannot be alone is a servant." He understood something profound. Solitude isn't the absence of love, it's the presence of power. It is the point where a man realizes his energy is too precious to be spent on noise. In the workplace, this transformation looks like quiet authority. The unconquerable man doesn't chase credit or panic when others take it. He knows no one can steal what he is. He's beyond image management. His confidence doesn't need applause. It's built on competence, not compliments. He speaks little but moves like a man whose value is non-negotiable. You can feel it when he walks into a room, not because he demands attention, but because he doesn't. He doesn't compete with men. He aligns with purpose. He doesn't crave leadership. He becomes it. And when he does speak, people listen not to the words, but to the certainty behind them. In relationships, he's no longer the boy seeking warmth at any cost. He loves from choice, not fear. He doesn't beg for reassurance. He offers stability. He doesn't need to be the center of anyone's universe. He builds his own and invites those worthy to orbit it. The woman who meets such a man feels it immediately, the difference between confidence and neediness, between affection and dependence. She may not even be able to explain it, but she senses it. This man cannot be manipulated by love, because he already carries it within him. And that changes everything. Because when you no longer fear losing someone, your love becomes pure. No jealousy, no possessiveness, no begging for attention, just peace. That's the rarest form of intimacy, two free people choosing each other, not completing each other. In psychology, this level of detachment is called secure independence. It's when your emotional thermostat no longer reacts to other people's weather. They can come and go, love you or leave you, you remain. That's why the unconquerable man doesn't fall apart when life shifts. Breakups, layoffs, betrayal, they no longer define him, because he doesn't draw identity from the external world. His peace isn't situational, it's structural. But don't mistake this calm for weakness. It's not a man who's numb, it's a man who's awake. He still feels deeply, but his emotions serve him now instead of enslaving him. Anger becomes fuel for precision, not chaos. Sadness becomes reflection, not despair. Desire becomes direction, not distraction. He's learned the art of emotional alchemy, turning pain into wisdom, loneliness into focus, rejection into redirection. That's what makes him unshakable. Because every emotion, even the dark ones, now serves a purpose. Attila the Hun embodied this energy long before psychology gave it a name. He terrified empires, not because of his brutality, but because of his composure. He could feast with his warriors one night and walk alone into silence the next. No excess, no begging, no need for validation. The Romans couldn't bribe him, couldn't seduce him, couldn't predict him. His unpredictability came from one truth: he desired nothing he couldn't command. That's the essence of power. Not taking more, but needing less. The unconquerable man understands that control isn't about others. It's about self-governance. He knows his impulses, his fears, his shadows, and he owns them. He doesn't pretend to be perfect. He's simply honest. When anger rises, he observes it. When doubt whispers, he listens but doesn't obey. That's discipline, not denial. And because he no longer hides from himself, no one else can use his weaknesses against him. That's why the world can't conquer him. He's already met every part of himself in the dark. Even Machiavelli in his writings hinted at this kind of sovereignty. He warned rulers that dependence breeds vulnerability, not just political, but emotional. He wrote, "He who builds his foundation on the people builds on mud." He wasn't mocking humanity, he was describing psychology. Any man who builds his peace on the approval of others will drown when the tide changes. But the man who builds it within himself stands firm even when the world burns. The unconquerable man lives with a strange grace. He doesn't chase pleasure, he chooses purpose. He doesn't resist pain, he extracts its meaning. He knows life isn't supposed to be comfortable, it's supposed to be clear. So he welcomes challenges not as punishment, but as refinement. Every struggle sharpens him. Every setback reveals another layer of truth. He becomes less reactive, more intentional. He moves like time, unstoppable, indifferent to opinion. And here's what most don't realize. When you reach this level of detachment, your destiny starts bending toward you. Opportunities appear not because you force them, but because your energy stops leaking through fear. People trust you because you no longer need their trust. They follow you because you no longer demand it. That's how great leaders are born, not from craving power, but from outgrowing dependence. Even love, the one thing that once ruled you, transforms. You begin to see love not as a prize, but as a partnership between equals. You stop measuring it by how much it gives you and start measuring it by how much truth it holds. You no longer say, "I need you." You say, "I choose you." That shift alone turns affection into art, and when you love from that place, it's unshakable. Because it's not about filling a void, it's about sharing overflow. The unconquerable man doesn't try to inspire anyone. He simply lives in a way that makes others question their own cages. Some will hate him for it, some will follow, but he doesn't care either way. Because his mission isn't approval, it's alignment. He's not here to be loved. He's here to embody truth so fully that love, respect, and destiny have no choice but to orbit him. And that's the final stage of freedom. Not running from the world, not conquering it, but standing so rooted in your own being that nothing, no betrayal, no rejection, no loss can move you from your center. That's the man who cannot be conquered, not because he's invincible, but because he's untethered. He fears nothing, needs nothing, hides nothing. He walks through chaos untouched, through temptation unmoved, through love unblinded, because his peace is his armor and his purpose is his sword. That's the kind of man the world remembers not for how many loved him, but for how completely he loved himself without illusion. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes the story was never about survival. It was about inheritance. Not the money you leave behind, not the property, not the titles, but the energy. The vibration of strength that echoes through others long after you're gone. That is the legacy of the unconquerable man. He doesn't just live differently, he leaves the world different. When a man breaks free from the illusion of needing to be loved, he doesn't just liberate himself, he frees everyone who watches him. His sons learn that respect is greater than attention. His daughters learn that a man's strength is measured not by dominance, but by discipline. The people around him begin to see what true freedom looks like in human form. Because here's the truth. We don't remember men for how much they were loved. We remember them for what they stood for when love was taken away. Think of Hadrian's Wall stretching across the cold northern edge of the Roman world. Long after the emperor himself turned to dust, that wall still stood stone after stone, carved from conviction. It wasn't just a border, it was a statement, a boundary between what was Rome's and what wasn't. That, as what legacy, is the line you draw between what I'll allow and what I'll never tolerate again. Every man leaves a wall behind. Some build it from fear, others build it from truth. And the ones built from truth, like Hadrian's, endure. Legacy isn't created in the spotlight. It's forged in the dark moments when you choose principle over popularity. When you tell the truth even when it costs you. When you walk away instead of begging to stay. When you stand alone rather than kneel with the crowd. That's how civilizations, families, and movements are built, not through mass approval, but through the example of one man who refused to break his integrity. Frederick the Great left behind a similar mark. He turned Prussia from a small, mocked kingdom into one of Europe's great powers, not because he sought glory, but because he sought excellence. He led soldiers through impossible winters, not with speeches, but by sharing their hunger and their danger. His men didn't follow him because he was loved. They followed because he was real. Centuries later, his leadership still teaches one timeless lesson that respect outlives affection every time. The modern man who breaks this cycle carries that same responsibility. You're not just saving yourself from weakness, you're rewriting the script for every man who comes after you. When your son sees you stand your ground calmly instead of screaming to be heard, he learns composure. When your team watches you choose fairness over flattery, they learn courage. When your partner sees you walk in truth instead of pretending to be perfect, she learns trust. That's the silent chain of influence power passed not by inheritance, but by example. And the beauty of it? You don't need the world to understand you. You just need one person to witness it and carry it forward. That's how legacies multiply. They ripple quietly like fire passed from torch to torch. You might not see your impact while you're alive. Most great men don't. But history has a strange way of catching up to truth. It always does. There's a story about Howard Hughes that doesn't make headlines. In his final years, as he withdrew completely from society, the people around him called him paranoid, eccentric, lost. But years later, engineers studied his designs and realized he had built prototypes decades ahead of his time. His madness held genius. His isolation held vision. He died alone, but not forgotten. Even in his chaos, he proved something. A man's legacy isn't written by those who misunderstand him. It's written by those who eventually catch up to his truth. The unconquerable man understands this deeply. He doesn't need recognition now. He's playing the long game. He's planting trees he may never sit under, building systems others will thrive in, setting standards that will outlive his name. He's not chasing fame. He's chasing impact. And that's why his energy stays long after his body goes. In leadership, this looks like stability that outlasts the man himself. The unconquerable leader trains others to think independently. He doesn't create followers, he creates successors. He doesn't micromanage, he mentors. Because he knows the truest form of power isn't in being needed, it's in being unnecessary. That's when you know you've built something real. He can walk away from his empire and it still stands. He can step out of the room and the order remains. That's not control, that's legacy. Philosophically, this is where most men stop evolving. They reach success, peace, or recognition, and they settle. But the unconquerable man keeps going. He moves from power to purpose, because power is for the self. Purpose is for the world. Once you master yourself, the next mission is mastery of meaning. How can I use this strength? How can I leave the place better than I found it? That's when legacy stops being about name and becomes about principle. Look at Joan of Arc. Yes, a woman, but a soul forged in the same fire. She was called mad, heretic, traitor. She was burned alive at 19. But her courage became myth, her conviction eternal. Her power was never about victory, it was about example. Centuries later, her flame still burns in the minds of those who dare to act from faith, not fear. That's what it means to live free, to stand so firmly in truth that even death can't silence you. When a man reaches that level, something shifts in the universe around him. His energy starts teaching others silently, without lectures, without slogans, just through the way he moves. People watch him handle chaos with calm, and something in them awakens. They begin to believe, maybe I can be that free too. That's the final gift of the beast, not destruction, but demonstration. He shows what's possible when illusion dies. He shows that peace doesn't come from being loved, but from living aligned. Years from now, when people speak your name, they won't remember every victory or possession. They'll remember how they felt in your presence. Did your energy make them small or make them rise? Did you bend to comfort or stand for truth? That's the measurement of a man. Because true legacy isn't what you leave to people. It's what you leave in them. The unconquerable man doesn't die with unfinished business. He's already poured himself into everything he's touched. His work, his family, his art, his silence. When the end comes, he doesn't beg for more time. He simply nods, knowing he used what he was given without fear. His story closes with the same calm it began, with a man standing at the edge of the city lights, unbothered by who stayed or who left, at peace with the echo he'll leave behind. Because he knows something most men never learn. You cannot take love with you, but you can leave strength. And strength, once awakened, outlives everything. That is the mark of a man who cannot be conquered. A man who lived not to be loved, but to leave others unafraid of losing it. They said he was cold, a ruler who showed no mercy, a man untouched by love. But what they never understood is that Frederick didn't stop loving the world. He just stopped begging for its permission to lead it. He learned that peace isn't found in applause, it's found in alignment. That a man's strength isn't in how many love him, it's in how deeply he can walk alone without losing himself. Years later, when his empire was secure, he would still walk those gardens alone. The same silence that once broke him now became his companion. Because when you no longer need to be loved to love yourself, you've already won the war every man is fighting. So remember this: the moment you stop chasing validation, the world starts chasing your energy. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Because the man who no longer needs their love will always own their respect. The boy died wanting to be loved. The man was born needing nothing. And that man, that beast, cannot be conquered. Watch it again. This time, listen for yourself in the silence.